She found the letter on a Tuesday, tucked between the pages of a Latin law volume she had no business reading, sealed with black wax and bearing a crest she recognized immediately, the crowned serpent of the Duke of Ashbourne. It was addressed to no one, signed by no one, and yet every word within it was the most dangerous thing Miss Cecelia Vane had ever held in her trembling, ink-stained hands. She should have burned it. She did not. Cecelia Vane was not the sort of woman society wrote poems about. She was the daughter of a disgraced barrister, a woman of 26 who wore her intelligence like armor and her plainness like an apology. Her dark hair was always slightly undone, her gloves perpetually ink-stained, and her countenance carried the particular expression of a woman who had long since stopped expecting the world to be kind to her. She worked in her father's chambers, or what remained of them, cataloguing briefs, transcribing testimonies, and quietly, methodically, understanding the law better than half the men who practiced it. It was not a life of drawing rooms and waltzes. It was a life of cold mornings and colder truths. And then the Duke of Ashbourne was accused of fraud. His name was Edmund Cavendish, and he was precisely the sort of man poets did write about. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw carved from contempt and eyes the color of storm water. He had inherited his dukedom at 23, his scandal at 25, and his total indifference to public opinion somewhere in between. The accusation was grave. It was alleged that he had falsified the deed to Thornwick Estate, disinheriting his own cousin, Lord Aldrich Voss, through a forged document. Voss had hired the finest legal minds in London. Ashbourne, in a move that stunned Mayfair to its very foundations, had hired no one. No one, that is, until Cecilia's father, barely recovered from his own professional ruin, presented the case to his daughter across a supper of cold soup and desperation. "He says he is innocent," her father murmured, his hands shaking around his teacup. "All men say they are innocent, father," Cecelia replied, without looking up at the document she was reading. "He also says," her father continued quietly, "that he has evidence he cannot explain to anyone, evidence, Cecelia, that is written in a letter." She looked up then. Her first meeting with the Duke of Ashbourne took place in his library at Cavendish House, a room so enormous and so cold that Cecelia felt rather as though she had walked into a cathedral that had given up on God. The fire had not been lit, the curtains were half drawn, permitting blades of grey October light to fall across stacks of leather-bound volumes. Somewhere in the raftered dark above, a clock ticked with the patience of a man who expected to outlast everyone in the room. The Duke stood with his back to her when she entered. He did not turn. "You are the daughter?" His voice was low and unhurried, the voice of a man accustomed to being heard without raising it. "I am Miss Vane," she replied, setting her folio upon the nearest table with a decisive click that seemed to surprise him. "And if you intend to be acquitted, Your Grace, I suggest you turn around and begin treating this meeting with the seriousness it deserves." He turned, and for one breathless, inconvenient moment, Cecelia understood why London's most romantic women had made such magnificent fools of themselves over Edmund Cavendish. His gaze was not merely handsome, it was searching, like a man who had spent years looking for something he could no longer name. He studied her. She held his gaze without flinching, which seemed to interest him considerably. "You are not what I expected," he said at last. "No, I agree pleasantly. I rarely am." If you are already captivated by Cecelia and the Duke, do take a moment to like this story and subscribe to the Duke's Lost Letters. New episodes arrive every week, and every single one is as scandalous as this. The weeks that followed were the most exhilarating and the most torturous of Cecilia's life. She worked with the Duke each morning in that cold, magnificent library, the candlelight doing battle with the autumn dark as she dissected depositions, and he paced, restless as a caged thing between the shelves.
She learned that he was not cold, not truly. He was careful. There was a difference, she discovered, between a man who felt nothing and a man who felt everything and trusted no one with the knowledge of it all. The letter she had found, the dangerous letter, was the key to everything. It was written in Ashbourne's own hand, years before the alleged forgery, describing the estate's true ownership in terms that directly contradicted Voss's claims. But to introduce it required confessing how she had come by it, and that thread, once pulled, unraveled into a knot of legal impropriety she was not yet prepared to face. "You are protecting someone," the Duke said one evening, watching her across the desk with those storm-water eyes. "I am protecting the case," she replied, without looking up. Cecelia. His use of her Christian name, the first time, unbidden, unguarded, landed in the silence between them like a stone dropped into still water. She felt the ripples move through her before she could stop them. She met his gaze at last. "You," she said quietly, "though I suspect you will make it extraordinarily difficult."
The trial was held on a bitter Thursday in November, and all of London came to watch. Cecelia stood in a chamber full of men who believed she had no right to be there, and presented the case for the Duke of Ashbourne with a precision and a passion that left the room in absolute silence. She did not raise her voice. She did not tremble. She laid the evidence before the court like a woman placing a wreath, deliberately, reverently, certain of its meaning. She introduced the letter. She did not explain how she had found it. She did not need to. The law, she had discovered, was less interested in origins than in truths, and the truth of that letter was so plainly written, so devastatingly clear, that even Lord Voss's barrister sat back in his chair with the particular expression of a man who had just understood he had already lost. But it was the final moment that Mayfair would speak of for years afterward. The opposing counsel, in a last act of desperation, turned upon Cecelia herself. He questioned her reputation, her right to speak, her father's disgrace. He used the word improper 3 times and unseemly twice. He implied with barely restrained viciousness that no verdict obtained through the testimony of a woman of her standing could be considered worthy of trust. The room held its breath. It was the Duke who rose. "I should like," Edmund Cavendish said, in that quiet, carrying voice, "to speak to the character of Miss Vane." The judge permitted it. No one in that room could quite bring themselves to stop him. "She is," the Duke said, turning not to the court but to Cecelia herself, "the most formidable, the most principled, and the most courageous person in this chamber. She is worth 10 of every man who has doubted her, and I would sooner trust my life, and I have trusted my freedom, to her judgment than to any silk-robed barrister in England." He paused. "If that is improper, my lord, then I confess I have lost all interest in propriety." Before we reach the final breathless moment, if this story has found a place in your heart, please do subscribe to the Duke's Lost Letters and leave a like below. Your support allows these stories to keep living, and there are so many more waiting to be told. The verdict came swiftly. Not guilty. The chamber erupted. Cecelia stood very still in the center of it all, her folio pressed to her chest, her heart doing something wholly undignified within her ribs. She was not a woman given to tears. She did not weep now. But when Edmund Cavendish crossed the room to her through the noise and the chaos and the cold November air still drifting beneath the great oak doors, she found that she could not speak at all. He stood before her. He did not reach for her hand, not there, not with all of London watching, but his eyes, those searching storm-water eyes, said everything that propriety prevented. "You defended me," he said softly. "I defended the truth," she managed. "Yes." A pause, barely a breath long. "Will you allow me, Miss Vane, will you allow me the very great honor of spending the rest of my life defending yours?"
The candlelight in that great stone chamber flickered. Somewhere outside, a carriage rolled across cobblestones, and Cecelia Vane, daughter of a disgraced barrister, woman of ink-stained gloves and undone hair, and a heart she had long since stopped offering to anyone, looked at the Duke of Ashbourne and understood at last that some verdicts are not delivered in courts of law. They are delivered in the quiet space between two people, where all the arguments have been made, and only the truth remains. She smiled. "I find," she said at last, "that I am prepared to hear your case, Your Grace." And so concluded the trial of the decade, and the beginning of the greatest love story London had never expected. Until next time, dearest listener, if this story moved you, leave a like, share it with a fellow romantic, and subscribe to the Duke's Lost Letters, where every episode is sealed with longing and delivered straight to your heart.